Hello and welcome to JK Plus One. I am not your host, PTF. He lost his voice. Did a lot of yelling at the TV, I think, during Breeders' Cup. I am your host, Jonathan Kinchin. We are back from Breeders' Cup. Want to start by thanking our friends at Qatar Racing, Sheik Fahad in particular, for having us, letting us hang out. I got this little lobster roll with French fries in the suite. We also got to see Nakatomi run. We got to see New Century run, and we just had an overall blast with the entire Qatar Racing team, and it was a ton of fun. So I want to thank Sheikh Fahad for that, and I want to thank everyone on this channel for paying attention during Breeders' Cup. Hopefully, you had a good Breeders' Cup. Congratulations to those who won, the 14 winners. Specifically here today, though, we're going to talk to one of those winners of one of those 14 Breeders' Cup races, and a guy that was hanging out before the race and a little bit after the race. So we were very happy to do that, and is a friend of Qatar Racing as well, with a runner on the weekend for the Claret and Gold. So it only made sense to make sure that we got him on here to talk about his first Breeders' Cup win. Our friend, your friend, my friend, Dan Blacker. Dan, congratulations. What's going on?
Everything's good, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. So the first one, before we get to Straight No Chaser, Christina said I got to ask you what Baffert yelled at you when you were on the pony the week leading up to the race.
Yeah, I went by Bob on the pony at Del Mar, and he shouted out, "Straight No Chaser's going to win the Breeders' Cup." So I was like, "Thanks, Bob. Appreciate the support."
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I guess
he knew first before everyone else. So.
Well, I guess if someone's going to yell, you're going to win the Breeders' Cup, like it might as well be Bob Baffert, right?
Yeah. You know what? He sits in he clocks all the horses, all his horses from the stand from the grandstand at Santa Anita. So, I mean, he sees that horse. He's a sharp guy. I'm sure he saw that horse work, and he's a pretty superior workhorse, Straight No Chaser. So he's eye catching, and I think any good horseman can see that. That's probably where the comment come from.
So, I mean, let's go to the day. We'll get into the whole background, your background and stuff later, but let's get into the day. I remember you had came up to the suite we were in the Qatar suite, and Sheikh Fahad was nice enough to let us use that as a home base and hang out. But you came up and I remember what you watched the filly and mare sprint replay, coming up with a game plan for like what you were going to do with Straight No Chaser. We didn't talk after you watched the replay, but ultimately, what was the plan you came up with that you gave Johnny some instructions?
Honestly, I didn't give Johnny any instructions at all. I never do. I mean, he's obviously done this a few more times than me, and I just defer to his best judgment. Anything I say will likely screw it up. So I just, you know what? But like after I saw Drayden coming home on that filly in the filly and mare sprint, it suddenly made me think, maybe the track isn't as speed favoring it was in the summer. But I mean, 7/8 is just a little bit of a different distance than 3/4, I think, and I didn't, even though that race kind of made me kind of think a little bit more about our tactics, it didn't really change my instructions to Johnny, which were non-existent anyway. So,
what's funny, I told you this afterwards, but I'm sure a lot of things were just a blur after the race. So we came down with Fahad and the team for Nakatomi, who was obviously in the race as well, and we went and watched it like on the apron right by the winner's circle. And, we all watch a lot of races. So you kind of know when it's not going to be your day. It doesn't take you to get all the way to the wire to know you're not going to win. And I knew Fahad knew a lot about racing and watched a lot of races and had that same eye. But at the 16th pole, he starts screaming. And I'm like, God, I got bad news, but like Nakatomi's not winning. And then I realized he was screaming for you. And I thought that was really cool that even though in defeat, he was extremely happy for you and Straight No Chaser.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. You know, Sheik Fahad is a great friend, obviously a great client, and Qatar Racing are a global racing force. But you know, we are put on a personal level. That was one of the things I remember most about that day. One of the moments that I remember is actually after the race, after all the kind of craziness had subsided. Um, my wife had gone back to work, and then my kids had gone back to their condo with the nanny. And then it was like I was kind of on my own. I was like, well, I just won a Breeders' Cup. What do I do now? And so then I just went back up to the Qatar suite. And, you know, Sheikh Fahad's always been so generous and kind, inviting us up there. And I was like, phew, maybe should I go in there or not? You know, Nakatomi was in the race, and I don't want to feel like I'm kind of going in there gloating and then I was like, I'll just go in. So I walk in, and it's like kind of quiet in there. There's a lot of people, but it was kind of quiet. And I walk in, no one really notices me walk in. And then like Sheikh Fahad turns around and sees me, and he's like, and like grabs me, lifts me up, hugs me. And I was just like, I just was so proud in that moment. And I just was so, I just was he's just such a big fan of racing, Sheikh Fahad, and for him to not only have a horse in the race, but be so humble in defeat, and then just be so happy for me, meant so much to me. And with all his whole entourage there, all the guys that work for him, like Fergus and David Redvers, they're all there, and O'Sheen, and just for him to not care about that, but just show how much passion he had for me, and for show how pleased he was for me. It really meant a lot to me, and it was so thrilling. But that's one of the points that I really remember about for the day.
It's funny, the two loudest times that the suite had been the entire 2 days was number one, when you came in and Sheikh Fahad picked you up, and they got loud and it erupted in there. The second time was when Brendan Walsh had a horse at Churchill, and I think some people might have had it in the suite and might have had a wager on, and it got pretty loud in there too. He lost a photo, so he was second, you were first. So no, I completely agree. That was the highlight for me as well. And what does it mean when you wake up the next day as a young trainer and you get a Breeders' Cup win? I mean, do you feel different? Did you go to work feeling different the next day, or did it just kind of feel like another day when you went back?
I think there's a lot of different thoughts and emotions that go through your head. At some point you just don't even believe it's happened. You know, it's something that it's like it's not even a goal, because it for me, you know, because it just seems so unattainable with a small barn. When you see these great trainers with huge barns, hundreds of horses, that never win a Breeders' Cup, or go year after year with going, not winning Breeders' Cups, you think, well, what chance have I got with a small barn, with a number of little horses, you know, with only a handful of horses that you think could be, you know, that kind of caliber. So like, for it to actually happen, it's almost unbelievable. And it's not even a goal. You think, wow, after I won a grade 1 with Hit the Road, it was like the next one great big goal for me was to win a grade 1 on dirt, which I felt like was attainable. But like, to even think that I could have a runner in the Breeders' Cup was something, you know, a big stretch. And then, I mean, a win was like, to win it felt, you know, beyond reach almost. But like, it was weird. Like, even though I say that, go with this horse, like he's just a great horse, and he just gives me so much confidence, and everything just went perfect going into the race. The final work, the post position draw, and the energy he had leading up to the race every day. You know, I felt bizarrely confident going into the race, and I didn't tell anyone. I think I told my wife that was it, and I think I told her I think he's going to win. And maybe I said it to Nick Luck as well. But like, I didn't want to sound too cocky, but it was just like, that horse, he just gives me confidence, and I just felt really good that he was going to run a big race. And you know, you never know. Obviously, you need so much luck to go your way to win. But I just had a really good, strong feeling he was going to run a big race. And you know, to come back to your question, you know, what does it feel like? I mean, yeah, I have sometimes I can't believe it. Sometimes I feel so grateful to all the opportunities I've been given to my racehorse for having this great horse come into my life, and the opportunity to win a race like that, and think of all the things that the path that I've personally been through to get to this point is crazy looking back. But the whole thing is still, I can't even believe it.
How worried were you about the pace scenario? I think everyone who had two eyes that could even barely read a past performance thought the pace was going to be extremely fast, with Straight No Chaser being one of those horses that could have been negatively affected by that. What were your thoughts about how the pace unfolded before and after?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it was something we were concerned about. I remember when the nominations, the pre-entries come out, you're like, looking down, it's just like every horse is like 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1. It's like, holy, what is this pace gonna be? And then, but so the main thing I was really worried about was the draw. I said to Joe Moran, I was like, we've got to be outside. I just pray we're gonna be outside. And then the first horse they pull out, bang, post 8, Straight No Chaser. I was like so relieved. I was so happy. I mean, the only thing I was concerned about was Skelly being on the outside because he's so fast, that horse. But like, honestly, once the draw was out and we saw it, and I talked to Johnny like at the breakfast tent the next day. I mean, I didn't even give him instructions. I said, you look at the race. He said, yeah, I'll look at it. And I just feel so confident with Johnny in the irons. He just gets along with this horse so well, obviously, and he's so talented and he's got so much experience, and like makes up for all my inexperience, so there's nothing I can tell him that is going to help him, so it's only going to be a detriment. So I thought, like, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. He knows how to read the PPs. He'll figure it out. I'm sure he'll make the right call. But I also had confidence that the horse could rate, like he rated when we asked him to in the Malibu, which was a long time ago, admittedly, but that's the last time we actually asked him to rate. That was the plan going into the race, and he did it without issue. So every other time since then, he's just the fastest horse in the race. So obviously he's going to go to the lead. This was, I didn't tell Johnny to take him back in that race, but Johnny could obviously see that there was highly likely going to be a strong pace, and the luck that we needed was a horse on our outside not to be going and pressuring us, and that's where the luck came and played a big part of the final result.
What do we think next? 4-year-old year, and what kind of 4-year-old year? We're gonna have a 5-year-old year.
He's actually 5 now, so 6-year-old.
5 now, 6-year-old year.
Yeah. So he only started in his first start was the middle of his 3-year-old year. So he was a little bit of a late bloomer. He just needed time to kind of grow up. He wasn't, he just wasn't ready for full racing as a 2-year-old. So MyRacehorse, obviously super patient guys. They always do what's right by the horse, and he just needed a bit of time. And he came in as a 3-year-old, but like, yeah, as a 6-year-old next year, I think the plan is, as far as I'm aware, obviously it's obviously still can change day to day, but the horse came out of the race really well. Looks great. I talked to the guys briefly about what's next, and I think the plan is currently to race him next year, which is great for me. But I mean, I think there's not a whole lot of good dirt sprint races coming up in the short term. So the big dirt sprints next year obviously are in the Middle East. So I think that's highly likely that we're going to point for a race in the Middle East at some point, in either the Saudi Cup or the Golden Shaheen at Maidan in Dubai. But I've always, I went through the Flying Start program, which the brainchild of Sheikh Mohammed, and spent a lot of time in Dubai worked for trainers there, and I've always wanted to go back with a real live chance on Dubai World Cup night. So hopefully, I mean, there's a lot of things that need to go right between now and then in order for that to come to fruition. But certainly with a horse like this, we can dream about that.
Does he feel like a horse to you that could do something like the Met Mile? I mean, obviously, if that, it would be a lot easier of a question if it was being run at Belmont and it was the full one turn rather than like the half one turn at Saratoga next year. But is he a horse that like you feel like could do something like that, or do you feel like that at that longer distance might dull his weapon, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think if you look at the horse, like physically, any horseman that looks at him, he doesn't look like a typical sprinter. I mean, he's kind of scopy, he's leggy. He looks like a horse you'd say this horse got to get a mile. You know, the way he looks, but obviously his pedigree certainly leans towards one turn, and his race record obviously leans towards one turn. But Johnny's indicated to me that he could get further. Certainly, you know, I think, as you say, a Met Mile one turn would be something that you consider. You never know. But typically, when a horse is really good at one certain distance, as in a Breeders' Cup winner, typically that's his best distance.
Right,
so
right.
I don't really am that excited about changing that, especially when there are $2 million races at 6 furlongs on the horizon that look pretty sweet, you know. So but certainly it's crossed my mind, and you know, it's feasible just because of the way the horse looks and his ability to kind of to rate a little bit. Never say never.
So you talk about the Flying Start, and obviously there's a lot of people that have gone that path as well. Let's back up a little bit more into the University of Edinburgh. How did you end up between that point to the Flying Start program?
Well, I was studying environmental geoscience. I was kind of a nerd in school. I liked science and rocks, and that was something that I always was riding horses, working for trainers while I was at school, while I was at college. But it was rocks was my area of expertise. And then while I was at Edinburgh, I was working for a trainer, the late Peter Monteith, he was kind of a trainer with a small yard in outside Edinburgh, and he was just a brilliant horseman. He would take these horses from the big massive yards down in south of England, the big jumping yards. He'd take the kind of rejects, take them over and give them a new lease of life, and they would go on and do great things. And he was just such a great horseman. And me and it was funny, we had there were three of us students would drive out every morning before lectures, before the sun came up, and go and ride in these like plowed fields. I mean, so far away from San Trinita, like, you know, the track, the guys complaining about the track at San Trinita day to day, they should see the plowed fields we used to gallop around outside Edinburgh. But it was myself, Sam Whaley-Cohen, and Ed Sackville. And Sam Whaley-Cohen ended up starting his own business and actually ended up winning the Grand National as an amateur jockey. I think he was the first amateur jockey in like a long time to win the Grand National. So it's a huge deal. And then Ed Sackville went on to, now he's a very respected bloodstock agent in the UK. So the three of us ended up going on to do good things. Me, I was just kind of riding on those guys' coattails. But we were riding out, and Ed told me one day, he was like, "Hey, I've applied for this program just starting called the Flying Start. It's, you know, it's a 2-year internship. You go around the world as a group learning about racing and breeding." And I just was like, "Oh, wow, that sounds amazing." So Ed ended up being accepted onto the program in the first intake, and we kept in touch, and he just kept saying, "You got to do this. It's incredible." And so the third intake, by the time I finished, was on my final year at Edinburgh, I applied, went for an interview in was it in England or Ireland? I can't remember. But went for an interview, met Joe and Clodagh, and I mean, I guess at that time there were probably only about 25 applicants. I don't know. I mean, I was very lucky to get on. I think nowadays, with all the thousands of applicants, I would got no shot. But back then, they were kind of struggling for people to take. So they'd take anyone, really. But so I somehow got on, and the rest, you know, is history. I did 2 years all around the world with 11 other like-minded, young, same age kind of graduates, and just one of the best 2 years of my life. And I owe them a lot for that.
And then how did you end up from, well, when you were at Flying Start, you worked for Mandela then, and then when you got out of Flying Start, you came back to Mandela. Is that how that all unfolded?
Yeah, I mean, I knew about Richard Mandela from watching the Breeders' Cup back in the UK. Obviously, he, you know, I think it's 2003. He won 4 in one day, which it was just. I mean, even now it's like crazy to think about when they got 14 races. Back then they had like 8. So to win like half the races on the day is just wild to think about it. And like the turf, the classic, the juvenile, and the juvenile fillies. I mean, talk about, you know, various different types of horses to win with. And so I always knew this. Obviously, it was like an incredible horseman, incredible trainer, someone that I would love to learn from. And then when I was working in France for Jonathan Pease, I'm trying to not make this a boring story, but I met Gary Stevens, and he was like, you got to go to California, you got to meet Mandela, you got to work for him. So like all that combined. And then when I got on the Flying Start, I told them right away, when I'm in America, I want to do my work placement with Richard Mandela. And so thankfully, he kindly accepted, and with a little help from Gary Stevens, and I went and did my 6-week placement with him in California while on the Flying Start, and he offered me a job at the end of that 6 weeks to when I finished the program. So I came back when I finished the program, came back in 2007 to start work for him full time.
And how was that? How was that experience? Because, you know, Mandela to me is one of those. He's one of those legendary trainers. He reminds me, he's like kind of like the West Coast Bill Mott. I would say Richard probably presents a little bit funnier than Mott does. Mott probably keeps his funny a little closer to the vest, but still, they're those legends that if you didn't know, they appear to be unapproachable, but no one who knows them feels that way. What was it like working for him and getting to know him and his operation?
I mean, he's just an unbelievable horseman. I mean, he's just, you know, I grew up, I've told this story a few times. So if anyone that's listening has heard this before, I'm sorry to bore you. But like I grew up around horses, my earliest age, riding horses. I did show jumping when I was growing up. I was always around horses, always ridden horses. Started working for trainers when I was 16, exercise rider. And so I came in to work for Mandela, and you kind of feel like pretty confident that you understand horses. You got a good idea of the way around a 4-legged animal. But then I started working for him in this environment at Santa Anita, and I started seeing things that I've never seen before. He would start doing things that I would be like, whoa, that's kind of weird. Why is he doing that? And then the horse would respond and like exactly how he wanted it to respond. And I was like, whoa, I was like, I never thought of that. That goes against everything I've really been taught or thought of and so that was like after 2 weeks. So like, you know, as the months went by, you know, I just learned so much. And I think being in a racetrack environment in America, it's much, you just tend to have a level of an intensity of horsemanship that's much higher, like required. It's more required than back home. I think back home horses are just much more tranquil. You train out in the yards where everything's way more relaxed, and horses generally are more tranquil and laid back. And here, just the way we train, the racetrack environment, maybe it's something to do with the feed, I don't know, but like horses are just way more amped up and way more high energy. So it requires more attention to detail, more horsemanship in order to get the things done that you want to achieve with each individual. So like there was just a learning curve for me. I had to like suddenly realize I was like, I don't know anything. I need to like swallow my pride and just keep my mouth shut and just start learning. So that's kind of what happened. But he's you know, Richard, he wants things done the Mandela way, and the employees need to learn that way, and you fall in line with that way. And the horses also, they need to fall in line and and follow that way. Otherwise, you know, they get the consequences. So like, but like they, you know, even a horse that's real high energy and he'll school it into the point where it falls into how he wants the horses to behave and in control. He never likes being out of control. So everything is in control, and everything that he is possible to keep control of, he does, like whether it be the employees or the horses. So it's you learn, you got to fall in line and follow the instructions. And if you do that, you get on okay.
What were some of the good ones you were around when you were with him?
I mean, there were some great ones, great racehorses, but the one that obviously that I've talked about before is that is the most well known is Into Mischief. Like he was a good racehorse. He won a grade 1, he won the Cash Call Futurity. But like no one knew what was in his future. Nobody. I mean, they retired him. I don't think Richard was delighted they retired him at the end of his 3-year-old year. I'll just put it that way. But like no one knew that he was going to go on to do that. I think they bred like 20 mares to him that first year, and they were like I think they were thoroughbreds, but like no, I'm just kidding. No, I didn't mean any disrespect to anyone. I'm just being silly. But like they were the top choice mares for sure. And out of those 20 mares, two of the foals ended up in the Kentucky Derby. So from then it was just but I mean, no one knew he was going to be one of the greatest stars of all time at that time. And he was just a really cool horse. I learned a lot from that horse. I remember his conformation, he was really sound, and he was literally the horniest horse I've ever been around. I mean, we used to take him to the paddock for the races with like 2 guys on him, and he would be like walking over to the breeding shed. I mean, he would like, woo! I mean, he knew what he was destined for right back then, and none of us knew. He was telling us. He was like, I know my job, boys. This is just a precursor to what's next.
Yeah. I already got 1 grade 1. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
Send me to Kentucky.
But I'm telling you, there's actually, I think, looking back on it, I didn't think of it at the time, but like looking back, I think that's probably a little part of why he is so good, you know, because you've got to get numbers on the ground, you know. And I think if he's ready to go, every time you lead him over there, he's going to get more mares in foal, more foals on the ground. I think that's a part of, you know, I mean, the libido of a stallion. You talk to the stallion guys, the libido is very important. And I think that's possibly a reason why he's so good as well.
That's so funny. You spent a little time in New York, but that was during Flying Start, right? With Albertrani.
Yeah. Just memorable years with Tom. You know, Tom is a totally different type of boss than Richard. A great guy. Loved working for him. Some really wonderful years in New York and in Florida and Kentucky. I was fortunate enough to travel around with all the best horses, and in, you know, Saratoga in the summer and Palm Meadows in the winter and Keeneland in the spring. You can't get any better than that when you're in your 20s. And it was just a great time. I loved, you know, we had runners in the Kentucky Derby and winners at Saratoga, and it was just a great time. Tom was just such a great guy to work for and a great horseman. I learned so much from him as well. So it's just really memorable times.
Well, we got to see when Straight No Chaser won. We got to see you with your girls, the 2 little ones and the adult one. I can imagine.
She's 11. Margot's 11, so not adult yet by a long way. She thinks she's adult, but not yet.
I don't want to ask the silly question. I know the answer, how special it was to have them there. But Jack Sisterson did tell me to ask you about when you met Christina, something about eyelashes. Is how you.
This is something Jack Sisterson he thinks is the funniest joke in the world, but it's not. So Jack taught me this, actually. It's all Jack's idea, nothing to do with me. But he had this. Jack had this way of flirting with girls, and he would he would he would go up. I can't do a Geordie accent, so I'm not going to do it. But he would go up to girls any girl that he kind of took a fancy to. He would be chatting to them, and he would say, in the middle of a conversation while chatting to them, he'd say, "Oh my God, you got the longest eyelashes." And any girl, if you compliment them on their eyelashes, they're always very excited and and very complimentary. So he, after saying that, he'll say like, "Oh, you got the longest eyelashes," and then, "Wait, close your eyes." And then when they close their eyes, he goes in for a kiss. So, obviously nowadays, I'm not condoning this behavior at all. It is not something that you want to put in your repertoire for talking to potential fiance or someone that you have any sort of respect for at all, really.
Yeah. So that's not how you met Christina. I get it.
Yeah, nothing to do with me or Jack Sisterson.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's why Jack's single.
Well, it's possible. I think he's just very picky as well.
Oh, that's funny. So Breeders' Cup win now. Yeah, you got the grade 1 on the turf with it's hit. I always mess this one up because I always want to say hit at a bomb, but it's not. It hit the road, right?
Hit the road, yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for Dan? Do you want to be the 150 horses, 3 different locations trainer, or do you like to kind of keep it compact? Like what's next for you in the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
I love California, and this is my home, and my children go to school here. I love training where I don't have to drive, and move around all the time. It is so unique, California, and it's such a wonderful place to train and go racing. I want to do everything I can to promote it as much as I can, and bring more horses here, and hopefully improve the purses and improve the racing here, because it's no secret that we've been through a really rough ride, roller coaster ride over the last few years, but it says so much about us as a community that we went through all that and we've come out the other side, and we're still here. We're still hosting Breeders' Cups. We're still one of the premier destinations for horse racing around the world. Everyone that came to Breeders' Cup last weekend, I'd like to find anyone that had a bad time. I mean, it's such a wonderful place to come racing, but we need support from the whole industry, and we need to support every jurisdiction in America as a community in the racing of America. And I think it takes more than just coming for one weekend and enjoying it and say, "Wow, this is so nice in California." It takes support all year round, and it's tough because we are the only jurisdiction without casinos, the only major jurisdiction without casino money bolstering the purses. So horse racing stands on its own here. The purses are purely generated by the betting, and so we need people, owners, to see that and see that California is vital to the longevity of thoroughbred racing in America. And I think it just needs a bit of everyone to kind of come around as a community and support California and send more horses out here to race, because it is great, and it is great to come racing here. It's so fun, and it's a great part of the circuit nationally. So you asked me what is next for me. That is my goal. I want to just promote California, try and bring more horses out here. Obviously, more horses means bigger purses. We just need more horses into the population. That's all. So, I think I always want to keep quality over quantity in my barn. That's always been my MO, and I just want to keep trying to do a good job with the horses that I have. And but I think I think that, just as I said, just try and get quality over quantity and do as good a job as I can for the horses in my barn and for that of their owners, and not necessarily build to a certain number. That's kind of where I'm looking right now, for sure. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny to me because I would think that while I don't want to necessarily not trying to highlight what you're highlighting is the negative, but I'm just saying that you would think that there would be more owners, trainers that would see the condition of California racing now, and that wouldn't work for them to come. You know what I mean? I mean, if you have a filly that has some pedigree, I don't. Why are you banging your head in 14 horse fields and at Keeneland to try to get a maiden win, or 14 horse fields to try to get graded stakes wins, where temporarily you could come to California and it's not. It doesn't seem to be, because of the current state, to be that it doesn't seem to be as uphill battle as it could be. So I would think there would be an influx, which in turn would kind of help get everything back to quote unquote normal in California. I mean, if I owned a filly or a mare, I think it would seem to make it more sense to me to run there than running a 14 horse field at Churchill for, you know what I mean? I don't.
Yeah.
I would think people would take advantage of that opportunity.
I think it's just also to think about is the conditions in terms of the turf course and the dirt here is just different to the East Coast. And some horses really thrive and excel here, and you don't really know for sure until you try it. But some horses will really move up in the ranks. You look at a filly like Hang the Moon for Phil this year. I mean, I think he's obviously done a great job, but you see just coming west, she's just really taken off and become a great horse for that group, CJ. Phil's obviously done a great job with her, but I think a lot of it is also they just come out here and they just thrive in California. I mean, it's great weather all year, and it's like a firmer type of surface on the main track and on the turf, and some horses just really thrive here. And I think you got to try it. But it is tough. It's not like coming here is a way weaker group of horses than Kentucky or New York.
Oh, no, I mean, some would argue that it's definitely, yeah, I just think just from a number standpoint, right? I mean, it would seem like from a number standpoint, more people would gravitate towards having to face 7 or 8 rather than 14.
Yeah, I think for sure. Yeah. And no doubt, I think turf racing especially is probably of a higher standard in general in New York, and probably Kentucky as well. So I think there is some class relays coming to California, but not a huge amount. And I think it's more about whether you think you got a horse that can really thrive on really firm turf. And
right.
I think that's the real key to being successful here, bringing the right type of horse out that you think is going to do well here. And it's tough. I know Todd Pletcher and Steve Asmussen, they brought out strings here in the winter before, and they've had a hard time and they don't come back. So it's just because it's competitive. It's tough. You got to bring the right horses out and just, when you're running against Bob on the main track, it's can be a little demoralizing. Speaking from experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's funny too, because people always ask me, the question I always get is a lot of times people ask me, what's your favorite racetrack? What's your favorite racetrack? And I never just give one, because I say for the overall experience, racing, nightlife, other life, everything, overall experience, Saratoga. Racetrack itself, structure, I love Keeneland. The racing's great there as well, and it's kind of unique because it's only 3 or 4 weeks in the spring, but there's no place I'd rather spend an entire day racing than Santa Anita. It's just the weather, the walking out on the apron and looking at the mountains. It's my favorite racetrack in terms of the where I want to spend the day. No,
I agree. I think Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita is my favorite Breeders' Cup. The atmosphere when they're running the classic, it's that twilight. It is just, the atmosphere is just like magic. It's just something about it, with the mountains and the atmosphere, there's nothing else like it. And I think the Breeders' Cup know that. I think they like Del Mar because Del Mar is like a little town. They can kind of take over the whole town. You know, everything's purple. They take over the hotels, and you come to Santa Anita, and it's like you're in LA. So what do you take over? Like Arcadia or like Pasadena or like downtown LA? You know, there's nothing to take over. So, but yeah, you're right. There's nothing like that. But one real quick point I just wanted to make is like, I think people make too much of I think in America, we're fortunate that we have our purse structure system is so good. You know, the money's so good for owners. You know, I'm talking on a global comparison. You know, in Europe, things are really tough in terms of the money, and the purses in the UK are terrible, and compared to the US. And you know, but everyone is so passionate about racing there. You can pull up anyone in the street and they'll tell you their pick for the Grand National, or, you know, people are really passionate. 1 in every 3 people you can talk to knows something about racing, whereas certainly is not the case in the US. And we're fortunate here. We've got this purse system with the racetrack system and the pools that has been grandfathered in, that keeps these great purses. And you know, you go back home and it's like racing is still thriving, and they're running for like 1/10 of the money we run for. And you still have all the sheiks coming in, all these massive, huge owners buying all these $1 million horses to run for like $2,000, you know? So it's as much as the purses is an important part of the structure of America. You know, Santa Anita, we're still, and Southern California especially, we're still doing pretty good. I mean, we're not Saratoga purses, we're not Kentucky purses, but it's not bad. We're still running for a lot of money. And, you know, I think there's a lot of positives to look at in terms of the California on a global level.
Dan, I congratulations. I appreciate you taking the time. It was fun. I've been meaning, it's funny, like I have this long list in my notes of people that I want to like have on, and then they just go and win Breeders' Cup races, and it's just like, oh, they just go, it's easier. I was going to do this on the list.
No, I really appreciate you inviting me on. It was great to come and talk to you. And I just feel really thankful to have the opportunity with a great horse like Straight No Chaser. He's just such a great horse. He's so talented. And I wouldn't, you know, to have the opportunity to have a horse like him, I'm very thankful to MyRacehorse. And I'm so thrilled that we got the win and can just enjoy it. And it's just one of those days I'll never forget. Me and my family, my wife Christina, it was just so emotional, and I'll never forget it. It was just indescribable how the moment of that win. So, well,
on to making some more. Hopefully we'll see somewhere in the Middle East holding up a trophy with Straight No Chaser. Keep him sound, and congratulations again.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan.
That was awesome. That was awesome. This sport is so fleeting in terms of successes. It's sometimes it's good and you're really high, and sometimes it's bad and you're really low. But I think that those low moments make it very easy to appreciate the highs, and you can hear that in Dan's voice when he was talking about this Breeders' Cup win and Straight No Chaser and winning that Breeders' Cup sprint, and the moment after the race and how it felt during the race and leading up to it. And I was there. I can witness that moment when he came into the suite, when he was contemplating whether or not he came into the suite, and I wasn't joking. It was the loudest in there it had been as Sheik Fahad picked him up to congratulate him on his Breeders' Cup win. I want to thank our friends at Qatar Racing once again. Want to thank Sheik Fahad, David Redvers, Fergus Galvin, the whole crew for making us feel so welcomed and as part of the Claret and Gold team. And we're going to keep rolling these out here to end the year. If there's somebody that you want to make sure we have on, someone you want to check out, someone you want to hear from, make sure you comment. Let us know who that person is. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. In the Money Media, we got to 10,000 subscribers, so that's a lot of fun as well. And make sure if you haven't subscribed that you do that now. I don't know where the button is, but it's around here somewhere. And we'll have another JK Plus One rolling out next week. I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll see you then.